The shovel hit something it shouldn't, and she froze. Because she already knew what lay buried there. So why had every man before him walked away from this exact spot? The wind snapped against the loose gate as Lydia Hayes gripped the handle, dirt sliding back into the trench she wasn't supposed to open again. Across the field, a tall stranger stood beside her broken waterline, boots planted like he'd found something worth staying for. "You've been standing on the answer," he said, not unkindly. She didn't deny it, couldn't. Behind her, 2 riders slowed on the road, watching too closely for it to be chance. Lydia wiped her hands, steady as ever, but this time she didn't cover the ground back up. She made a choice. If you were standing where she stood, would you trust the only man who refused to look away? The mornings in Red Basin always came quiet. Not soft, not gentle, just quiet in a way that settled over the land like dust. The kind of quiet that let you hear the wind long before you felt it. Lydia Hayes stepped out onto the porch with her coffee, the tin cup already cooling in her hand. The boards beneath her boots creaked once, then held. The fields stretched out past the split-rail fence, pale and uneven under the early light. Nothing looked dead at first glance. That was the trouble. The rows still held their shape. The soil still turned under a shovel. But the color was wrong. Too dull. Too still. She took a sip, then set the cup on the porch rail and walked down toward the north line. The same path as yesterday, and the day before that. Her boots followed the narrow track worn between the rows, past the old cottonwood stump, out toward the shallow dip where the irrigation trench bent slightly before running west. The air smelled faintly of dust and something colder underneath it. Water, maybe, or the memory of it. She stopped where she always stopped. There wasn't anything to mark the place. No broken board, no signpost, just a slight flattening in the ground where the slope should have continued. Lydia leaned on the stick she carried, pressed it down into the soil, and waited. The ground gave a little, then held. She shifted the stick, pushed again, deeper this time. The resistance came sooner than it should have. For a moment, she stood there without moving. The wind picked up just enough to stir the loose strands of hair at the back of her neck. Then she pulled the stick free, turned, and walked back the way she came. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, Micah was already out by the fence, trying to wrestle a loose wire back into place. He had one boot braced against the post, his jaw set tight the way it did when he didn't want help. "It's pulling from the bottom," he said without looking at her. Lydia stepped up beside him, glanced once at the post, then reached down and pressed the soil around its base with the heel of her boot. The post shifted, just enough. "Dig it out," she said. "Set it deeper." Micah paused. "We got the shovel by the shed." "I know." He hesitated, then added, "Ma, why don't we dig the north line instead?" The question hung there, thin as wire. Lydia straightened, brushed the dirt from her hands, and picked up the loose end of fencing. "Fence first," she said. "Storm'll take the whole line if we don't." Micah didn't argue. He just nodded once and went for the shovel. By mid-morning, the heat had settled in. Not heavy, not yet, but enough to dry the sweat before it could fall. Lydia was stacking feed sacks near the barn when she heard the wagon before she saw it. 2 men. She recognized the horses first. Wade Collier drove, reins loose in his hands, like he had nowhere particular to be. Trent Haskins sat beside him, hat tipped low, one boot hooked over the side. They pulled up near the gate without calling out. Lydia wiped her hands on her skirt and walked over. "Morning," Wade said. "Morning." Trent climbed down first, boots hitting the dirt with a dull thud. He took a slow look around, not at her, not exactly, more like he was measuring distance. "Heard the yield's been light," he said. "Some." Wade nodded toward the north line. "Mind if we take a look?" Lydia stepped aside. They walked it the same way the others had. Straight to the dip. Straight to the place where the ground held wrong. Wade crouched, picked up a handful of soil, let it sift through his fingers. Trent stood a few feet off, eyes narrowed, following the line of the trench as it bent west. "Dry year," Wade said finally. "Nothing much to be done about that." Lydia didn't answer. Trent kicked lightly at the ground near the slope, just once, then turned away. "Shame," he added. "Good land otherwise." They didn't stay long after that. Wade tipped his hat, said something about coming back when the weather turned. The wagon rolled out the same way it came, slow and easy, like the visit hadn't mattered much. Lydia watched until the dust settled. Behind her, Micah stood near the fence, shovel resting against his shoulder. "They didn't even dig," he said. "No." He shifted his weight. "You told them where it was?" "I didn't have to." Micah looked out toward the north line, then back at her. "So why don't we—" "Get the wire set," she said. He stopped. For a second, it looked like he might push again. Then he picked up the shovel and turned back to the fence. The rest of the day passed in small sounds. Hammer on nail. Wind through dry grass. The hollow knock of wood against wood. Lydia moved between tasks without hurry, without pause. Feed the chickens. Check the latch on the south gate. Patch the corner of the roof where the last storm had lifted a board just enough to matter. By evening, the light stretched long across the field, turning everything gold without warming it. Micah sat on the porch step, pulling off his boots one at a time. Lydia stood at the pump, working the handle in steady rhythm. The water came up slow, then faster, then steadied into a clear stream that caught the light as it fell into the bucket. Clank, pause, clank. Micah watched it for a while. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. Lydia didn't stop pumping. "Where to?" "Anywhere else." The handle rose and fell, metal against wood. After a moment, she said, "This is where the water runs." Micah didn't answer. She filled the bucket, set it down, and rested her hand on the pump handle just long enough to feel the last of the movement fade. Out beyond the fence, the north line lay still in the evening light, holding something underneath it, something that hadn't moved in a long time, and she knew exactly where it was. The wind shifted late that afternoon, carrying dust low across the field in thin, restless lines. Lydia stood by the pump, rinsing her hands, when she heard it, slow hooves on dry ground, not hurried, not lost, just passing through. She didn't turn right away. The horse stopped near the gate. Leather creaked. A man's weight shifted down to the dirt. "Ma'am." The voice was low, even, not loud enough to carry far, but it held. Lydia wiped her hands on her skirt and walked over. He stood just outside the gate, one hand resting lightly on the horse's neck. Big man. Not just tall, broad through the shoulders, built like someone used to lifting more than he had to. His coat was plain, dusted at the hem. Hat pulled low enough to shade his eyes. "Need water," he said. "For the horse." Lydia nodded once and unlatched the gate. "Pump's there." He stepped through without hurry, leading the horse beside him. The animal lowered its head before he even reached the trough, as if it already trusted the place. Lydia watched him from a few steps off. He didn't look around the way most did. Didn't take in the barn or the fence or the fields like he was measuring value. He focused on what was in front of him. The bucket, the rope, the handle. He worked the pump once, testing it. Then again. Water came up slow at first, then steadied. He held the bucket low so the horse could drink without splashing. Only then did he glance out across the field. Not long, just enough. His gaze moved along the rows, then to the north line. It stopped there, held for a second longer than it should have. He set the bucket down, walked out a few steps. Lydia didn't follow. He reached the edge of the trench, nudged the soil once with the heel of his boot. Then again, a little harder. The ground didn't give the way it should. He stood there, still as fence post. Then he said it. The line's broken under the second drop. Lydia leaned one shoulder against the gate. Took you one look. He didn't react to that. Just nodded once, like a man confirming something already settled. Water's backing up, he went on. Can't move through. West side's starving, even when you've got enough to run it. The words fell plain. No effort in them. Lydia stepped closer now, stopping a few feet off. Been that way a while. How long? Long enough. He glanced at her then. Not curious, not doubtful. Just checking. Then he looked back at the ground. I can fix it. She let that sit between them. He added, won't take long if the collapse ain't spread. And if it has, then it takes longer. A corner of her mouth shifted, not quite a smile. He wiped his hands on his coat. I'll sleep in the barn. Won't be in your way. Lydia didn't answer right off. The wind moved again, catching the edge of her dress, tugging it lightly. Somewhere behind them, Micah dropped something, metal against wood, then went quiet. The man didn't look toward the sound. I won't take a cent unless it runs, he said. Still simple, like it wasn't much of an offer. Lydia studied him now, the size of him, the steadiness, the way he stood without leaning into it, like he knew how people saw him and chose not to use it. What's your name? She asked. Caleb Ridge. She nodded once. Barn's open. That was it. No handshake. No agreement spoken out loud. Caleb went back to the horse, led it to the side, tied it off with a loose knot that would hold but not bind. He moved like he'd done it 1,000 times in 1,000 places. Micah came up beside Lydia, quiet as he could manage. That him, he whispered. She didn't look at him. That's him. Micah watched as Caleb lifted his saddle off in one smooth motion, set it down near the barn wall. The horse shook out its mane, settled. He ain't even asked where to dig, Micah said. Lydia folded her arms. He knows. Caleb stepped back out into the yard, wiping his hands again, eyes already drifting toward the north line like something was pulling him there. The sun had dropped lower now, light turning thin and gold across the field. Shadows stretched long from the fence posts, cutting the land into quiet pieces. Caleb looked at the trench once more. Then he turned toward the barn without another word. That night, the wind died early, the kind of still that made every sound carry. Lydia stood in the kitchen, rolling dough out on the counter. The window cracked just enough to let the air move. She could hear Micah shifting in his chair, hear the low creak of the barn door settling into place, and underneath it all, nothing. No questions, no talking, no boots crossing the yard again. Just the presence of someone who had seen the same thing she had, and didn't pretend otherwise. Caleb was already at the trench before the sun came up. Lydia saw the lantern first, a low glow near the north line, steady against the dark. By the time she reached the porch with her coffee, the light was gone and the sound had taken its place. Metal biting into soil, slow, even. She didn't go out right away. Instead, She set the cup on the rail, tied her apron, and started the day the same as always. Feed first, then the fence, then the coop. The rhythm didn't change, but the sound carried. Each strike of the shovel landed where it needed to. No wasted effort, no shifting around to find the spot. He had chosen his line and stayed with it. By the time she walked out toward the trench, the sky had gone from gray to pale blue. Caleb was already waist-deep in the cut, shirt darkened across the back, sleeves rolled, hands steady on the shovel. He didn't look up when she stopped at the edge. 3 feet down, he said. Soil changed. Lydia stepped closer, crouched just enough to see the wall of the trench. The color shifted there, darker, tighter packed. Keep going, she said. He nodded once and went back to work. That was how it went. She didn't stand over him, didn't watch for long. She gave him what he needed, then moved on. When he needed the line widened, she showed him where. When he hit a section that held too firm, she pointed to where the slope should carry. No extra words. Micah came out after breakfast, boots half-laced, hair still out of place. He stopped short when he saw the trench. Did he start already? Lydia didn't answer. She was carrying a coil of rope toward the shed. Micah walked closer, peered down into the cut. Caleb paused long enough to shift his grip. You ever seen pipe laid this way? Micah asked. Caleb wiped his hands on his shirt. Once or twice. Micah crouched, studying the wall like he meant to learn it. Why'd it collapse? He asked. Caleb tapped the side with the handle of the shovel. Weight sat wrong. Ground held too long after rain. Pressure builds. Something gives. Micah nodded slowly, like he was fitting it into something he already knew. He stayed after that. Not in the way children usually hover. He didn't get in the way. Didn't ask the same question twice. When Caleb answered, he answered straight. No softening. No skipping over the hard parts. By midday, the trench had stretched longer, deeper. The sun sat high and sharp, pulling the moisture out of everything it touched. Lydia brought out a tin cup and set it on the fence post near where Caleb worked. Didn't say anything, just left it there. He noticed it, picked it up later, drank half, set it back. That was enough. In town, the talk started before the week was out. Lydia heard it without trying. At the dry goods store, a woman paused too long between sentences. At the feed counter, someone lowered their voice just enough to make it carry. A man out there, they say. Sleeping in the barn. Whole week now. Lydia measured out flour, paid, and left. Didn't hurry, didn't linger. Back at the ranch, the work kept moving. One afternoon, the wind came up fast from the west, sharp enough to lift dust in sheets. Lydia was crossing the yard with a bucket when her boot caught the edge of a loose board near the trench. The ground shifted under her weight. For a second, she lost it. The bucket tipped. Water sloshed hard against the rim. Then a hand caught her arm. Firm, quick, no hesitation. Caleb steadied her, his grip strong enough to hold, careful enough not to pull. The moment she found her balance, he let go, right away, like he knew exactly where the line was. You all right? He asked. I am. He nodded once and bent to pick up the bucket she'd dropped. Set it upright. Stepped back. No more than that. But something in the air shifted. Not loud. Not obvious. Just different. That evening, Micah sat closer to the edge of the porch, watching the north line like it was something worth knowing. You think he'll fix it? He asked. Lydia leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. He said he would. Micah nodded. Out in the field, Caleb's figure moved steady against the fading light, cutting the trench a little farther before stopping for the day. He didn't rush to finish. Didn't slow down either. Just kept working like the land would answer when it was ready. And for the first time in a long while, Lydia didn't walk the north line after he stopped. The days settled into a pattern that didn't ask to be noticed. Morning came. Caleb was already out there. The trench stretched longer now, the cut running clean and deliberate along the slope. The old line had started to show itself in pieces, splintered pipe, sections crushed inward where the weight had pressed too long. Lydia saw it once, just once when she stepped close enough to pass him a length of rope. He had uncovered a section that had folded in on itself, the clay packed tight around it like it had no intention of letting go. She didn't say anything, just nodded, then turned back toward the barn. By the second week, the air had shifted, warmer in the mornings, the kind of warmth that didn't promise rain, just time passing. Micah was out there before breakfast most days now. He carried tools without being asked, stayed close but not underfoot. When Caleb spoke, he listened like it mattered. "Why you cut it wider here?" Micah asked one morning. Caleb rested the shovel across the trench. "Water needs room to move. You crowd it, it pushes back." Micah looked down into the trench, then back at the field. "Like the fence post," he said. Caleb gave a small nod. Same idea. Lydia heard that from the yard. Didn't turn. Just kept stacking kindling by the door. In town, the looks stopped pretending. At Heller's store, Julia stood near the counter, her voice lowered, but not enough. "Folks are talking," she said, folding a bolt of fabric that didn't need folding. "A man staying out there like that." Lydia set her flour on the counter. "They talked before," she said. Julia's hands paused. "That's different." "Is it?" Heller didn't look up from the ledger, but the page didn't turn either. Lydia paid, took her things, and left. On the walk back, the wind carried dust along the road in thin lines that broke and reformed around her boots. She didn't hurry, didn't slow, just walked the same way she always had. Earl Sutton came by 3 days later. He didn't ride up to the house, didn't call out, just stood by the fence like he wasn't sure he should be there at all. Lydia saw him from the yard and walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Earl." He took off his hat, turned it once in his hands. "You mind if I speak a minute?" She leaned against the fence. "Go on." He glanced toward the north line. Caleb was there, working steady, Micah a few feet off carrying something too heavy for him, but not complaining about it. Earl looked back at Lydia. "That pipe," he said, "the one he's digging up." She didn't answer. Earl shifted his weight. "Men that came before. Collier, Haskins. They knew." The wind moved between them, quiet but steady. They stood where he stood. Earl went on, saw what he saw. Lydia's gaze didn't change. "And they said nothing," he added. "No." Earl nodded once, like he'd expected that. "They've been waiting," he said. "Land like this, once it goes bad enough, folks sell. Cheap." He stopped there. Didn't dress it up. Didn't add anything more. Lydia looked past him, out toward the field. The trench cut a clean line through the soil now, the broken sections laid out beside it like bones. "How long?" she asked. Earl let out a slow breath. "Long enough." She nodded. That was all. He put his hat back on and stepped away from the fence. "Thought you ought to know," he said. "I do now." He left the same way he came. Quiet. No dust kicked up behind him. Lydia stood there a moment longer, then turned back toward the house. That evening, she cooked like she always did. Pan on the stove, bread set to the side. The same movements, the same order. Micah came in first, talking about the trench, about the way the water would run once it was clear. Caleb came in after, stopping at the basin to wash his hands. The water ran over his fingers, darkened with soil, then cleared. He dried them on a cloth he'd brought himself. Sat down when she set the plate in front of him. No one said anything at first. The sound of the fork against the plate filled the space between them. Then Lydia spoke. Earl came by. Caleb didn't look up. He said the men before you knew. Caleb paused just long enough to set the fork down. I heard them talking, he said. Back in town. Numbers. Acre price. He picked the fork back up. Didn't know all of it. Lydia nodded once. No anger in it. Not the kind that showed. Something steadier. Micah looked between them, sensing something he didn't yet understand. He didn't ask. Outside, the wind had dropped. The air sat still over the field. A week later, the rain came. Not heavy, not all at once. Just a slow, steady fall that soaked into the ground without running off. Lydia stood at the edge of the west field the next morning, boots pressed into damp earth. The water held, didn't pool, didn't vanish. It stayed where it should. Behind her, she heard the pump. Clank, pause, clank. Caleb working it, testing the line. The sound ran steady across the yard, even and sure. For the first time in years, the field answered back. It didn't come all at once. The change showed up in small ways first. The ground held its color longer after the rain. The west side didn't crack open by noon. When Lydia pressed her heel into the soil, it gave just enough, then settled like it remembered what it was meant to do. She didn't say anything about it, just kept moving through the day. By late summer, the rows stood fuller. Not perfect, not easy, but alive in a way they hadn't been. The kind of growth that didn't ask for attention. It just stayed. The men from town came back. Wade Collier rode in first, slower this time. He didn't call out from the gate, just stepped down and walked up like he belonged there. Looks different, he said. Lydia stood by the porch, a cloth in her hand, wiping down the edge of a crate that didn't need it. Does it? Trent Haskins came the next day. Same path. Same pause near the north line. Only this time he didn't step into the field. They didn't stay long. Didn't ask to walk the rows. Didn't offer advice. They just left. Micah watched them go from the fence, arms resting on the top rail. They ain't coming back, he said. Lydia didn't answer. Out in the field, Caleb worked the pump, steady as always. The handle rose and fell in the same rhythm it had kept for weeks now. Clank, pause, clank. Micah turned toward the sound, then back at Lydia. He fixed it, he said. She looked out across the field. No, she said after a moment. He cleared it. Micah frowned like he was trying to understand the difference. By fall, the orchard came in heavier than it had any right to. Branches bowed under the weight. The air carried that sharp, clean scent of fruit and dry leaves, the kind of smell that stayed in your clothes long after you left the field. Micah worked the ladder without being told, passing crates down one by one. At one point he laughed, just once, loud and sudden, like it surprised him as much as anyone. Lydia turned away before he could see her looking. Caleb moved through the rows without comment. He lifted, carried, stacked. Same as always. No change in the way he worked, even when the field gave more back. That evening, the light stretched long across the orchard, settling low between the rows. Lydia walked the north line for the first time since he'd started. Not checking, just walking. The trench had settled in, the soil packed firm around the new line. No dip, no flattening. The slope held clean all the way through. She stopped where she used to, looked down once, then kept going. Caleb stood a little farther ahead, near the edge where the rows met open land. He wasn't working, just standing there, hands loose at his sides, looking out the way a man does when he's finished something and isn't in a hurry to leave it behind. She slowed as she reached him. He didn't turn right away. The wind moved lightly through the rows, carrying the dry sound of leaves brushing together. "I don't want to move on," he said. The words came plain. No lead-up, no weight added to them. Lydia didn't answer. He glanced at her then, just once. "I want to build this place right," he went on. "See it through proper." A pause. "With you." The space between them held. Not empty, just waiting. Lydia looked down at his hands. Rough, steady, open but not reaching. She didn't rush it, didn't fill the silence. After a moment, she placed her hand in his. Not tight, not soft either. Just enough. She held it there for a single breath, then let go, that was all. Behind them, Micah's voice carried faint from the yard, calling something out about the crates. The sound of the pump followed, slow, even, certain. The next spring came with less waiting. Water ran where it should. The field held steady through the early heat. Folks from 2 counties over started coming through, not to look, but to buy. The road stayed busy, but the gate stayed closed unless Lydia opened it. One morning, she wrapped a loaf of bread in the best cloth she had, the one she'd kept folded away for years, and handed it to Micah. "For Heller," she said. Micah took it, turned it over in his hands, then looked at her. "You sure?" She nodded. He didn't ask again. Out by the barn, Caleb worked the pump, the handle rising and falling in that same steady rhythm. Clank, pause, clank. Lydia stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the yard settle into the day. Micah stepped off the porch and headed down the road, the cloth tucked careful under his arm. The field stretched out beyond him, full and even under the morning light. And the man at the pump didn't leave. Years from then, folks passing through Red Basin would see the fields first. Rows running clean, water moving where it should, a place that held steady through dry seasons and long winters. They'd ask how it turned around, and someone might point toward the barn, or the north line, or the man working the pump like he'd always been there. But the truth wasn't in the pipe or the trench. It was in a woman who knew what was broken and refused to call it something else, and in a man who saw the same fault line and chose not to turn away from it. He didn't try to take over her land. He didn't try to carry her burdens for her. He stayed. He listened. He worked beside her until the ground answered again. And somewhere along the way, without either of them naming it, that became something stronger than a promise. Some people come into your life loud, with plans and words and reasons, and some come quiet and change the shape of things just by standing where others walked past. If you had been in Lydia's place, knowing what was broken, watching others pretend not to see, would you have trusted the one man who finally did? If this story stayed with you, there are more like it waiting just down the trail. Stories about people who didn't give up on the land or on each other. You're always welcome back here.